everyone. Thank you for joining us tonight for this very special opening of All at Once, a solo show by Mia Bella Chavez. We are so glad that you all can join us today and be here for this very non-traditional opening reception. This is actually our first solo student show that is a virtual opening reception. And so it's very special for us, very special for Mia Bella, who is the artist, the featured artist tonight. So yeah, let's go ahead and get started. And just a quick reminder, actually, before we do, if you can keep your microphones on mute. You don't have to have your video on if you don't feel comfortable with that. That's totally fine. But we do ask that if you keep your microphone on mute while Mia Bella is sharing more about her artwork. So yeah, let's get started. And again, tonight's exhibition is brought to you by Lasfotosproject. We are a nonprofit organization. We work with girls from the ages of 13 to 18 and from communities of color, using photography as a mentorship tool so that they advocate for themselves, their communities, and their future careers. And I can share a little bit more about Lasfotosproject. We go to the next slide so y'all can see a little bit about our core programs. We have 3 core programs. For those of you who are not familiar with it, Esta Soy Yo, which is our founding program. Our Esta Soy Yo program really reflects on the individual voice and the student's self-expression and identity. And so this was actually the first program that launched Lasfotosproject. It's been with us for 10 years. It's the foundational program, like I mentioned, which all of our students start off in. And then we also have Digital Promotoras, which is a community advocacy program. And for this program, students use photography as a tool to advocate for their communities. They study photojournalism, documentary photography, in order to capture the authentic stories of our community members and ensure that their stories are being told in an authentic and accurate way. And the last program that we currently have is CEO, Creative Entrepreneurship Opportunities. And this is for our advanced students who are looking to really further their photography skills and really dive into what photography means as a career. So through this program, our students are able to be trained and hired as professional photographers in order to develop their portfolios, build their networks, and really build their community so that they can launch their careers as photographers. And so I will take any questions about the organizations if you all have any for me afterwards, but I know you all are here for one very special person, one very special reason. So without further ado, I do want to present to you Mia Bella Chavez, who is our featured artist for tonight.
Hi, everyone. First and foremost, I'd just like to say how much it means to me that all of you have taken time out of your busy days to see this body of work that I've been working on for about a year now. For those of you who I have yet to formally meet, my name is Mia Bella Chavez, and I'm a photographer from Los Angeles. In addition to my academic education, I've also been able to study art at Inner City Arts, the Echo Park Film Center, Lasfotosproject, of course, and a few more. I've also had the privilege of studying art in Cuba for 2 weeks through a study abroad program, and also was able to spend the previous summer studying art at California Summer School for the Arts. This fall, I will be studying art at Loyola Marymount University. To sum it up, I'd say that my work has a bit of range as I'm still getting to understand my identity as an artist. But generally, I describe my work as pretty portrait-based because I'm really interested in capturing people how they are. Next slide, please. So you'll see up here is a photo, or a collage rather, that I made dated December 13th, 2009, which would have been 4 days from my 8th birthday. So I think that I'm not really exaggerating when I say that I've always been pretty driven to images and image-based works. As a kid, my elementary school art teacher, Ms. Serrano, she taught us that paper has memory. She said that no matter which way you fold it or bend it or crumple it, it will have a way of remembering that impression and that manipulation in a way that is really different from any other material. And that's something that's always really stuck with me in my work. Later on in a middle school art class where I chose to only make collage, a table partner once said to me, "I'm really impressed by your dedication to collages, or I used to be, but now I realize it's because you can't draw." And I think that's pretty funny. And now looking back on it, I'm not really offended as much as I am confused as to why the two have any relation. But I can admit that collage has allowed me to independently execute various shots and ideas that would have required a lot more production time and effort if I had done it in a different type of medium. Next slide, please. Later, as a student at the Getty's photography program, we studied the work on display in their cut paper play exhibit. There, I was amazed by the detail on the works of Christopher Russell and Sue Kim, the works that they were able to accomplish using an X-Acto knife, which was a tool that I had previously regarded as simply a tool to trim edges, but it proved to me to be capable of so much more. And so I added these lists of artists to sort of this invisible list that I kept in the back of my pocket, but I struggled to imagine a way in which I could actually implement these techniques into my work. To an extent, I think that I felt a little limited by my identity as a photographer and didn't want to be considered a collage or mixed media artist because I sort of internalized the invalidation that the crafts received. But on the other hand, when presented with a large scale or a longer project such as this, rather, I knew that I didn't want to spend all of my time behind a laptop because I desired a tactile photo project that wasn't just working with film or making prints. And in all the work that I do, I really try to keep a majority of the time that I spend in my art to be as minimally technologically based as possible. Because it's my understanding that if I rely on technology too much, I become a tool to the program's process rather than the other way around. And that by bringing my work into the physical world, or anyone bringing their work into the physical world for that matter, you're able to create a deeper connection to it and maintain ownership. When I was working on some of my pieces, I'd be spending ages assembling them just the way that I intended to in my original plan. And then I'd look at it and absolutely hate it. And so I just swipe my hand down the page and rough up all the paper objects because it didn't feel right. Or maybe it felt too simple. I wanted my pieces to be playful, but not juvenile, and refined, but not too technical. My hope essentially was that the viewer would look at the amount of detail and look at the piece rather and understand the time and effort that went into it. And that they would be forced to acknowledge that collage isn't just cutting and pasting pretty pictures onto another piece of paper. It's actually valid, skillful work. One of my main takeaways from that cut paper play show was the idea of play. Cut, paper, play. What did that really mean? When I would get really frustrated with my work, or I would hit a wall in terms of my creativity and didn't know how to proceed in working on the series, I'd be reminded that the reason why I chose to work with paper to begin with was because I love to be creative with my hands and to work with my hands. So then I'd pull out my handy binder and I just sort of sort and layer or cut things until something came to me. So these are all just little objects or backgrounds that I've printed out and been able to cut. And so I would just pour these out onto the floor and I'd just play. And generally pieces that started from play would change a lot before they reached their final form, but overall the process allowed me to experiment with techniques that I could later apply to pieces that I was working on. Next slide, please. As I began to put together a concept for this body of work, my mentor Ricardo said, look at the artists that you really like and see what they have in common. So my two artists that I chose were Jillian Waring and Nadia Lee Cohen, both of whom explore self-portraiture extensively, but what really stood out to me was not only their ability to capture images, but also to tell stories. And in one of Jillian Waring's most famous works, she recreated images from her youth and old portraits of her family members, but the way in which she did it was by wearing wigs and prosthetics to capture these. And Nadia has a very unique way of incorporating fashion and old Hollywood cinematic elements into her work. But the main takeaway was that the two shared a practice of self-portraiture and an impressive amount of production. And while I wanted to emulate that same level of skill and effort, I had to acknowledge that I didn't really have the same resources as these artists. I didn't have, really any sort of budget to work with. And so I had to be really crafty. Next slide, please. At the same time of conceptualizing this show, I was applying for college and I was being asked really big questions. Who are you? What makes you different? What do you have to offer? And I just had no clue how to answer it. And it had a way of sort of consuming my every thought. And on one hand, you just check the boxes and okay, I'm Latina and I'm female and I'm from Los Angeles, but what did that actually mean? And so my mind would just sort of run laps around my memories and analyzing every question in each moment and decision as though it would give me the answer, and it didn't. But what did help was walking alongside the LA River. And I have the privilege of living 5 houses away from it. So the LA River was one of the first things that I'd see when I start my day and the last things that I'd see when I end it. And so it had a way of sharing its wisdom with you if you really paid attention. Life unfolds so quickly along the river that it rapidly changes, but it changes with the world. And so in this way, walking along the river was like taking a temperature check of the neighborhood because of how clearly life unfolded on the stage that was the LA River Bikeway. In the beginning of this process, I was really intimidated by the task of completing 10 of these, but when I finished it, I realized that it still had so much room to grow. And so that's when I pitched the series to Jess, and with her help and the help of my wonderful mentors, Stephanie and Ricardo, that number went from 10 to 35 in a couple of weeks. So it was a team effort. Next slide, please. My mind began the search by uncovering the context of these identifiers, the context in which these identifiers presented themselves most clearly. And so I'd come up with a key part of my identity, such as being from Los Angeles, and I would build that into a list of its main elements. Okay, when you think of LA, you think of palm trees, fame, people, apartments, etc. And so from there, I might have a vision of what I might want the piece to look like, in which case I would sketch it out. And so this is just some of my sketches. And it became a habit as a way of practicing my art when I was away from a camera, in a sense. And so I'd be in class and I'd be in a meeting or at lunch, but I wouldn't really be there at all because I'd be thinking about my work. And so maybe I'd get an idea and I would just be able to scribble it out and get it on the paper before I'd forget it. And it also really helped me keep track of my ideas because my process was so lengthy and touch and go that when you're collaging your own photos, you don't really know how long it's going to take before it'll turn out because I might have to shoot a really specific object or location, and then I have to wait to receive prints because I don't have my own photo printer. And then from there, I would cut out all the objects, but that could take hours depending on the number of elements a piece has or the complexity that each of those cuts would require. So there was just a lot of, you have to really anticipate that. Next slide, please. So from there, I could go ahead and build out a shot list and photograph each element that I might want to include in the piece. So it really requires you to be organized, and this is a few ways in which I was able to keep organized. So on the left side of the frame, you'll notice a bit of a graph. And so that's just a technique that I use to track the process of each piece. So did it have a background? Did it have a mock-up? Did it have a drawing? Was it printed? Was it cut? Was it mounted? Etc. And then just more general shot lists and notes, as you'll see. This is a compilation of a few pieces, and they're original sketches, but yeah, I've sort of outlined the process for these two pieces from start to finish. So after developing a sketch or a concept that you'll see on the left, I can begin making a mock-up. And so I put all of the images into a document in Photoshop, so that way I can understand what sort of dimensions I'll need to print each one, rather than having to print everything, it being the wrong size, and then having to go back in. So this allowed me to be a lot more intentional with how I use my resources. And so I'd apply what are called mask layers, which simulate a cut and paste technique without actually removing any data from the original image itself. So after removing those temporary layers, I would be left with the original images, but they'd be scaled to the sizes that I needed. And then I could paste those into a plain document, as you'll see those stars on a plain piece of paper. And then I would print them and cut them as close to the desired object's edges. And finally, I can layer those over over a background image of the LA River, which you'll see kind of in that second to last column. And finally, I'm left with the final image. Next slide, please. This is a compilation of a few pieces and their original sketches. So you'll notice that with the exception of some creative liberties, many of the pieces in their final form are actually really closely resembling their initial sketches that inspired them. And so when I'm working with pencil and paper, I'm not really drawing per se. I'd like to think that I'm more sketching photographs, because I'm working more in a manner that focuses on locations and objects that I already know exist to an extent, and working around that. So that way I know where to go and I can visualize all the objects that I draw out. For the rest of the portion of this program, I will now be guiding you through a few pieces that I've chosen that I think best highlight the range in technical aspects of my work. As I begin, you'll notice that most of my titles are individual words or phrases, and I did that to emulate the fact that they all started from a list of identifiers that I wanted to explore to better understand who I am. And so in that way, these pieces are visual mind maps that begin with those single words and explore their true identity and form. And so I chose to include this piece first because it was the first one that I actually conceptualized, and it set the tone for the rest of the series in a lot of ways. Titled Artistry, I aim to discuss the ways in which my artistic process has required me to wear a lot of different hats, in a sense. So if I can't get a subject to be in front of my camera, I have to be the model. And if I want something to be in the frame or not be in the frame, I have to, or if I want a certain lighting or wardrobe setting, etc., I'm the person that has to execute that. So that's something that I wear proudly, and so this is my way of exploring what I think my work sees when I'm marching towards it. You know, like trying to execute an idea with all these different hats or tasks on me. When I had first thought of portraying myself as some sort of mechanical creature with multiple arms, and the series had the same essential concept, but it was gonna be taken in single, regular portrait photographs. So, but I realized that that route would require me to do one of two things. So I could either execute that by taking a long exposure, which would allow the camera to collect more visual data. So I might be able to get that concept of the arms, but the drawback from that would be that it would be really blurry and that it wouldn't be as sharp. And I wasn't ready to get rid of that either. On the other hand, I could have just done the effect in Photoshop, but to me it threatened the integrity of the piece, which led me to collaging my photos. The object in my hands, from going clockwise from the lower left hand, is an X-Acto knife, an exposed roll of film, a ruler, a bottle of paint, and a camera, which are all, in my opinion, really crucial tools to my artistry. And I chose the image in which my hair was covering my face because I feel that it redirected the attention to who I am and what I have to offer rather than what I look like. Because also my face was in the middle of the frame, and so it would have been the first thing that the audience would have noticed. But this way, you're forced to look left to right on the arms. Next slide, please. Glitz and Glamour, which is the collage pictured above, explores Hollywood as a symbol for success and perseverance. It's a geographic identity that I think is so strong that not even Angelenos can deny it. And as a kid, it felt like Hollywood was in my backyard, yet unreachable at the exact same time. In elementary school, I watched TV like it was a full-time job, and and a lot of my school peers had parents in the industry, and living in LA, you're not really a stranger to detours and street closures because of one award show or premiere or the other. But I didn't know anyone famous, and I had never been on a set before, and I didn't see anyone that I knew that on TV that looked like me. And so in this way, Hollywood becomes an omnipresent yet exclusive character in many people's story. Nonetheless, this childhood awe of fame and Hollywood, or whatever it represented, instilled upon me, I think, the importance of doing whatever it is that you do really well, or as well as you can, essentially, because you never know where it can take you. And Hollywood also taught me that you can make a job out of everything. So visually, the rocks on the LA River replace the Hollywood Hills, which are so often pictured in depictions of Los Angeles. And my presence, which is in the horizon, kind of gives, in my opinion at least, the image a little bit more depth, and the illusion that I am photographing from behind this wall and looking into this toy-like play set, watching it play out. The image of me is backed by stars from the Hollywood Walk of Fame. I have a pretty strong connection to the piece because when I was experimenting with a variation of techniques and different ways to cut out those palm trees, I tried to think 3 or 4 different ways, and the one that looked the best was the one that was the hardest. So I spent about 30 minutes on each palm tree, but it's really satisfying to look at now from my end. So I'm happy to have done it. Next slide, please. To me, a really distinct feature of the LA River is the fact that the environment changes so quickly. And so this wall in particular really stood out to me because of the broken frame and just the busyness of the wall. And I couldn't help but wonder what was once in the frame. And I started to imagine that maybe this frame was in a gallery. You know, this was a gallery frame. And so I wanted to put art in it. So I I took this really bright studio portrait to contrast the busy background, and I cut away some of that negative space from that main image of the wall, and I backed it with that portrait. But when I actually looked at it, I just kind of laughed at myself. And I think I don't really like to take myself too seriously, personally. And I knew well enough that others would probably feel the same way. And so I thought about the public magazines that I'd read through as a kid when waiting for my mom at the nail salon or hair salon and whatnot, and how all of the faces and portraits in there would be sprawling with unibrows and goatees and devil horns. So I sort of channeled that into my approach and scribbled over my portrait here with paint markers and pen. Where other people saw gang markings or defacement of public property, I was able to recognize the artistry that these individuals created and was really taught to acknowledge graffiti and other forms of public art as such and give credit where credit is due. So to me, when I look at this photo, these walls are scribed with conversations that are encoded in a language that is only spoken by certain communities. So that inspired the title, Discussion Board. Next slide, please. This is also one of the first pieces that I made. It's titled Latina. And I think that that was one of the first parts that, one of the first identifiers rather, that came to mind, not only because of my own identity and perception of myself, but also because it feels that in discussing it, I can't help but acknowledge the fact that it's one of the first things that other people see when they look at me. And in this way, it sort of coerces their thought or their first impression of me in one way or another. And so I feel that as a result of my skin color, I've walked into rooms and people have sort of seen a different or perceived me as a different way than I perceived myself. And so I wanted to sort of make a caricature of those aspects of being assumed certain things about how I speak or assuming things about how I dress and what I wear. And so I wanted to explore that a little bit more visually and build upon these certain visual symbols that are so often connected to the false representation of Latinos in Los Angeles in particular. Next slide, please. This piece is called Triple Self-Portrait, and it is inspired by a similarly titled painting by Norman Rockwell. So in that piece, I was really inspired by his way of including his process as a part of his process, because to me it sort of demanded the attention of the viewer to look at your work as a whole. And so in his painting, he painted himself painting himself looking in a mirror and looking at a reference image. So in this way, he showed his process in 3 different steps. And so I kept playing with that concept of my own work and how can I split my work into 3 steps? What are my 3 steps? And ultimately what I came up with is that my 3 steps are very similar to that of the scientific method. And so the first one, which would be represented by the background, which is also inspired by David Hockney, would be just the ability to experience the world around you. In this case, it's the setting in the background and also the art around you. And the second step is the ability to record that and capture that. So my way of doing that is by taking images. And so you see me there with one of my favorite cameras. And finally, the third step would be your conclusion. So in my process, my conclusion is my piece and what does this say? What is it? How have I been able to articulate the world around me? And so I was really aiming to include the viewer into my process, because this in many ways is exactly what I see as I'm putting together the pieces. I'm looking down at my hands and I'm looking down at the paper. So in looking at this and viewing it with me, you become a part of the process. Next slide, please. This piece I think is really fun. It's called My Studio. So as I mentioned, the LA River has been a really big inspiration to me and to this process as well. And so when I was walking, I noticed this shopping cart upside down in the LA River, and I couldn't help but notice that it looks like a little room. And so I wanted to decorate it as though it was my studio. And I did actually have a physical studio in the LA River. And so I began brainstorming about what would be my first steps into decorating. And to me, a really big part of who I am is just prints. I like having prints everywhere. I like to be able to look at images and touch images and work through them. But my process is kind of Mia Bella organized, I'd like to think. So I know where everything is and I know how to get to everything, but not everyone does. So to me, this is something that I'd see as like, oh, okay, I'm sure that there's some sort of order to it, but everyone else might not see that same order. And so I also wanted to highlight how my process becomes a part of everything that I do. When I was cutting a lot of these images, I'd find those paper objects everywhere. I'd find them in my backpack, I'd find them in my folder, in books, even once in the shower, just absolutely everywhere. And so I wanted to bring that in with a lot of these like photographic evidence by including photos that are in my room, so it does have a personal aspect to it, and also just other photos that of my own that I am drawn to. You'll also notice, if you're looking a little bit closer at it, and as a reminder, these will all be online, so if you don't get a chance to really look at the details right now, there will be an opportunity to do that later. But anyway, if you look really closely, you'll notice that there are really tiny little Post-its, and those were made out of actual normal size Post-its, but I just cut them down really tiny until they were about the size of my fingernail. And then I wrote really small on them in micron pen, and I just wrote out to-do lists. I wrote out notes that I would probably normally leave for myself, and as I'm speaking to you right now, I'm looking at about 10 Post-it notes, so I'm really not kidding when I say that these are everywhere. So this was just a way that another way in which I was able to include myself into the narrative of the LA River. Next slide, please. Just as a heads up, everyone, this will be the final piece that I will be breaking down for you today. So if you have any questions or thoughts, I absolutely encourage you all to just hold on to those for a second, because there will be an opportunity to share them. This piece, titled Glitch, explores the duality that is required from me as someone who navigates a lot of different spaces. So on one hand, I was one of the few brown kids at an elite private high school and was thought of as having an accent. But on the other hand, I am a broke brown kid from LA that was thought of as speaking more white than the other kids. So in that way, I always felt too white for the brown kids and too brown for the white kids. And so I developed a way of code switching and essentially chameleoning myself to best succeed in my surroundings. And so I'd be the exact same person going into every single room, but it would just, I would develop a different dialect, or I knew how to best succeed in any environment, essentially. So in this image, I challenged people to see me as both, as a mural with taggings and as an elaborate studio portrait. So on the technical side of this, I was able to achieve this effect by painting onto a small portrait of myself. And then from there, I shredded it down into really small pieces using an X-Acto knife. And from there, I did perpendicular lines to that. So the lines of the other face were parallel. But so I cut lines down the face of the other bigger portrait that you see here. And I was able to very carefully weave them through one another. It was a process. I think the reason why I include it last is because how much time this actually took me, despite I think looking a little bit more simple than some of the other pieces, because there is only one main visual element. This technique took a lot of practice because of how delicate paper is. So when I was finally finished it, you will notice at the very top of my scalp in the image that it ripped a little bit, a lot actually, and I was stubborn and refused to start again. So I was like, no, we're gonna make it work. So I was able to patch it up from the back, and I just left that as a little battle scar. But yes, that concludes my portion of this presentation. But again, I wanted to take the time to publicly thank Lasfotosproject for all that it's done for me in the past years, and particularly Jess, Ricardo, and Stephanie, because without the three of you, this would not have happened at all. And Lucia, our web wizardress, really appreciate you. So thank you all again for coming out, and I really look forward to hearing your thoughts about the show.
Thank you so much, Mia Bella, for that. There were things there that I, as Mia Bella mentioned, I was supporting with putting some of the back end pieces together on the website. And so I was able to get some up close views of all the images. And there were things there that like I didn't notice at first glance that you mentioned that now I'm definitely gonna have to go back and look at all those images again, because yeah, amazing. And I was sharing some of those links with you all. Like Mia Bella mentioned, it is online if you want to go take a closer look at that. lasfotosproject.org/all-at-once. And I do recommend viewing it on a desktop so that you can click around and enlarge it and view all those like beautiful little details that Mia Bella was sharing with us. And so you can get really the full scope of the work that she put into this. So now we're actually going to invite, Mia Bella mentioned them a couple of times, so we want to invite them to share a few words. Mia Bella's mentors, Ricardo and Stephanie, will be sharing a little bit about their experience as well, and supporting Mia Bella and sharing a few words as well. So we're going to actually hand it off to Ricardo first.
Hi, everyone. Good evening. Thank you so much for being here and supporting Mia Bella in this journey that has been amazing to watch. I have known Mia Bella for 4 years or so. I have taught her, and I've been in a classroom with her. I traveled to Cuba to learn about art and culture, and it has been a pleasure to see her development as an artist and how she created this astounding series. Looking at her presentation or listening to her presentation tonight, I could not stop and think how art has provided us for 30,000 years a means to express our reality, from cave paintings to abstract art to posters that call upon social and political injustice. All of these reflect our reality. With this series, Mia Bella has elegantly portrayed her reality, both externally, talking about her navigation through LA, and internally, thinking about her own identity. She used sophisticated symbolism, metaphors that you can see in her work to poetically talk about her reality in ways that are only attainable through her experience and the use of collage. So I really admire that. From using items like a chair or an empty frame on a wall to the building a collage, to building a collage beautifully that reflects her perception of the world. I was able to attest to her grit, dedication, thoughtfulness, creativity. Those are unquestionable. Believe me, I have seen how her motivation to grab a camera or an X-Acto knife to dissect and process school and social pressures. She is a mature and independent thinker that has limitless creativity and fearlessness. She was able to produce and finish this amazing work through a pandemic, and even while being stung by a stingray, who attempted to boycott the exhibit. But it's a true story. But jokes aside, this is just a testament of her commitment as an artist. Mia Bella really rewards me as a teacher, mentor, and friend. I have great pleasure seeing her expressing her talent and passion for photography, art, and life. It is rewarding, but also is an honor to be a mentor of Mia Bella and work with such a fantastic group at lasfotosproject. So thank you, Stephanie, Jess, and everybody involved that's in the background, making this great organization move forward. I really appreciate everything that you do to help students like Mia Bella grow and become a great artist as they are and find a voice of their own. And I just want to say congratulations, Mia Bella, and I wish you the best. And I'm sure that this is just the beginning of your career as an artist. And thank you all for being here and supporting her, because I know that it means a lot to her and all the whole team that's involved with this. So thank you so much.
Mia Bella, I just want to say I am so proud of you. First, that was amazing. You really pulled it off in every sense of the word. Thank you to everyone who came out and listened to Mia Bella's presentation. She put so much thought and work and time and heart and soul into this entire project. So I'm really glad that she was able to share it. Albeit not the way that we anticipated sharing the show. I think, Mia Bella, you really communicated well, and your work and your heart came across virtually, so that's pretty amazing. I think that's worth noting. I am really proud of your work ethic. The time that Mia Bella took to create this from start to finish, I think we can all, after like hearing about her process, it's pretty amazing. And not even what you made, but like when you made it during a pandemic, finishing high school, not to mention, that's amazing. You truly are gonna look back on this time, I think, and with awe. I know I will. Content-wise, I feel like your work is really relevant. And I think that would be true for a lot of different types of people. I think there's a lot of different places that we can enter into your work. And I think that makes it really special. Visually, I think it's really fun to look at, but I think that what keeps you looking at it, keeps you sticking around to look at it, is all the different layers. Thank you for being so vulnerable and expressing some really heavy content. You really kind of wore yourself for everyone to see, and you were really vulnerable, and I really appreciate your honesty. It's just been a really big pleasure to support you and to watch this project grow from 10 pieces into the massive project that it is. It really is. There's a lot of breadth and depth to it. And I've learned a lot from you, Mia Bella. I've learned a lot about work ethic. Honestly, you are really committed. And I've learned a lot just about you as a person. You are a beautiful person. Thank you for expressing that through your work. The possibilities are truly limitless for you, and I'm excited to see where you go. Thanks for having me along.
Great. Thank you so much. And yes, our mentors are definitely very important parts for our students who are doing solo shows and who are just going through our programs. They support our students from day one, you know, when they start learning photography if they're beginners, or when they start just conceptualizing their shows when they're doing a solo show. So we have much, much love and appreciation for all of our mentors as well, who are able to support us to do that. So before we get into a Q&A, we actually want to take a group photo since we all can't be together in person. We're going to do sort of a virtual photo booth with everyone. And the way that we'll do this, Jessie is on our AV, and so she will be counting us down. So we want to give you a little heads up so that you can, you know, just like prepare yourself. And then we'll just ask you to hold your pose until Jessie gives us the clear that the photos have been taken.
And so I'm unmuting myself. Hi, everyone. It's so great to see you all here. Thank you for supporting Mia Bella. I'm giving everyone a second. If you are wanting to turn on your video, now is the time to do so. There's several of us here, and so it means I have to screenshot several pages. So basically hold your smile. I'll count down as I go through the pages, but you all might be under for it once. So get your pose, your angle, your lighting, and just smile for as long as you can. Like pretend you're at like a family gathering and all your family's taking the same photo 10 times over. I see some cameras coming on. I'm just gonna give folks another minute. Okay, so here's page 1. Is everyone, oh, okay, I'm seeing some other cameras go on, so I'll give it another couple seconds to let all of them fill out. Folks got their smiles ready, very cute. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, smile. Oh, I hit the wrong key. All right, 1, 2, 3, smile. Okay, and then I'm going to do one more, so if everyone can just give me another amazing family photo smile. All right, 1, 2, and cheese. Great, awesome. Thank you so much, everyone. I'll pass it back to.
Yes, thank you. By the way, it was really great to see all your faces. I know a lot of you were on, didn't have your camera on, but it was really great to see you all. So I'm glad that we were able to capture that quick moment. So we're gonna move on to our Q&A from Mia Bella. And so the way that we'll go about doing this, if you would like to just pop your question into the chat, you can feel free and do that. And then I'll read your question out loud so that Mia Bella can ask it. Or if you'd like to ask it yourself, you can just go ahead and unmute yourself and then ask your question. Or if you have something that you'd like to share with Mia Bella, give her some accolades and some props for some of her work, we welcome that as well. So we'll open it up now to any questions that you all have.
I don't have a question, but can I please share?
Yes.
Hi, Mia Bella. I'm Stephanie's mother-in-law. And so I've heard a lot about you, and I was very excited to be able to join you. Actually, my husband and I joined you, but he just stepped away for a moment. But we loved seeing the work that you did, because we're still learning all about this too. So to have you explain everything so thoroughly was really enlightening for us. And we had different favorites, which was really fun. And I just wanted to share with you that his favorite was the last one. And he loved that you left the mark in your scalp there. And he said, good for you. So I thought that was really fun. And my favorite was the one down in the river where you had your all your Post-it notes. So
Got it.
I just was really happy to join you. Thank you for inviting us. And we were glad that we could share this day with you.
Thank you.
Continue on. You're going to do marvelous things, I know.
I appreciate your kind words and of course your presence. So thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Thank you. And we have a question in the chat from Leah. So Mia Bella, what are you most excited to work on and experience while you're at LMU?
I think
she also made certain to say, go Lions.
I love that. Well, for me, I think that one of the big selling points for LMU, and one of the things that I'm most excited about, is that I still get all of the great benefits of being in LA and being able to, have these beautiful relationships and connections that I've already been able to make for myself. But it'll be, a sort of like it'll be a different experience, because I'm going to be on the opposite side of town. There's a few freeways separating me from my family, and I'm going to, I'm going to do everything there instead. I want to be straight on campus, and I want to go, do all the local stuff. So I'm just really excited to understand LA a little bit more and diversify my understanding of what it really means to be from LA. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. And let's see, we have a couple of comments. First of all, someone in here being a proud mama. You're a proud mama. And then someone else, Thomas, wanted just to say, I just want to say how wonderful your work was. The last one especially spoke to me. I enjoyed hearing you explain your thought process behind your work, and I know you will do amazing things.
Thank you.
And Helen has a question for you. She said, first of all, thank you for taking us through your process, Mia Bella. And she's asked, is your Nana and Tata piece, which is online, by the way, Mia Bella didn't share that one tonight, but you can go online and view that one. Is your Nana and Tata piece for that one, what motivated you to have your self-portrait be a shadow?
Yeah, that's a really great question and a really great observation. So good on you, Helen, for being so quick with that. But for me, I chose to have my self-portrait be a shadow because I think that it was my understanding, and I think it's a communal experience too for a lot of second or third generation children of immigrants, is that it's made very clear to you that everything that you do and all that you accomplish is not just your own. It's very much a reflection of the result of the sacrifice of, that the people in your family have made. So in a lot of, I think that the knowledge of that has definitely impacted and educated this type of decisions and choices that I've made. So yeah, I think that I wanted to play around with that like visual and representative thought of a shadow and reflection. Thank you for your question.
Thank you. Stephanie wants to know if you're working on any new projects.
That's a great question. I am currently working on 2 projects right now. They're sort of like my goals before school starts. And so one of the projects that I'm working on right now is I'm working to document 30 different theaters and venues in Los Angeles, specifically during the hours of 2 and 5 a.m. so as to accomplish a really dreamy, beautiful light quality through a long exposure. And the reason why I'm choosing to document these venues and theaters is because I've just always been someone who's really noticed the signage around me. And so I always look to marquees to wonder, what are they saying today? And so now, in a time where a lot of these venues are not actually being used for performances and shows, I'm really curious as to how each of these locations are using this platform in a sense. And so I've been going around and documenting that. And another project that I'm currently working on is in a lot of my, I guess, field study through the spending time along the LA River, I kind of developed a love for people watching in a sense. And you see a lot of people, like a lot of the same people all the time, especially if you walk during certain times of the day. And you can kind of almost get an understanding of who they are and what kind of people that might be. And so I'm also starting a new series of documenting locals in my neighborhood along the river. So I'll be setting up a portrait studio a few times a week before I start school. So keep in contact for that.
Great, thank you. Definitely gonna keep an eye out for all of that stuff. It's very important. Preserving history, right? Before I go on to the next question in the chat, does anyone have a question that they want to ask out loud? Nope. Okay, so the next question, also from Helen, she said, your work is so beautifully detailed. Which piece took the most time to create and why?
That is a really great question. I'm going through and I'm skimming. I'm trying to think as I go. And so I think with that question, I'm tempted to look at it in one of 2 ways. So on one hand, some pieces took me a really long time because it just wasn't right. The Latina piece, like I mentioned, I started first, but it was probably one of the later ones to be finished because it just went through so many different versions. And so, but on the technical hand, that it didn't require that much from me. So, in that sense, it was that piece. But if you're asking about how much time to have spent on a piece itself, is portrait. That one took a very long time.
I think you went out, your sound went out a little bit, right? You were about to say it and you left us in suspense. Your sound went out.
Oh, I'm sorry. Okay, so rewind. The piece that took the longest would have been my triple self-portrait. And I say that because that's the one with the really funky background and you got the hands in there and it just kind of breaks the fourth wall. But in order to take that photo, I had to take a lot of different images for the background and be really organized about how I store those images. And then from there, I had to format all of them and make them really tiny and make them fit in a way that was visually pleasing. So dealing with so many different really tiny elements was new to my work because I'm just more used to spending a lot of time doing details in a big piece. So that definitely challenged me, but I did it and I think I learned a lot from it. So I'm still really tied to it. So thank you for that question.
Thank you. Do we have any other questions for Mia Bella?
Can I add something real quick? This is a question because I know that this is part of a program that there's a lot of teens that, you know, are in this program and they get to know how it is to overcome things. So when you were working, I bet there were moments that you had self-doubt or you felt like, you know, it was hard. What do you say to those young girls that are out there that motivates them to keep going and not give up? Is there anything that you have for them that you can say?
Yeah, that's a really great question. For me, there was absolutely moments in which I doubted it. I think that there would be times, you know, I'd put together a piece late at night and I'd be like, yeah, I love it, it's great. And then I'd wake up the next morning and look at it and be like, what was I thinking? What is this? And so there was absolutely that back and forth relationship of, you know, I really like it, but then I also don't. Sometimes I would look at my pieces and I'd say like, it looks like a kid made this, you know, like it needs to be harder. It needs to be more detailed. You know, I need people to know that like I didn't just put this together. Like I wanted people to actually see the work that went into it. And so I absolutely had doubts and questions myself. But yeah, I think just really like sticking to it and understanding the ways in which you work. And so what I mean by that is anytime I had those sorts of moments, I'd either find a way to get new inspiration, and generally that would kind of bring me through the hump, or I would, you know, talk to someone about it, you, Ricardo. I just, you know, be like, listen, I hate this. What's wrong with it? You know, and sometimes just even getting someone's opinion on it or affirmation can definitely make all the difference. But with that being said, have really great judgment about who you have that person as. This doesn't mean like, care about what everyone thinks, and just as long as everyone likes it, it's fine. I think that, you know, just have your core people whose opinion really matters to you, and everyone else just kind of ceases to exist. That would be my advice for just carrying on.
Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah, great. Thank you so much, Mia Bella. Any other questions or thoughts, comments anyone want to share? Like I mentioned, any accolades or even just comments about what your favorite piece was, what you found most interesting as well. We welcome those too.
I'm gonna jump in real quick. First of all, usually I don't jump into these, but Mia Bella, I just want to say congratulations. So proud of you going through this like exhibition making process, as other folks have mentioned, during such a momentous time with so many things going on. And so hats off, first of all. One thing I wanted to ask is, now that you've like rounded out this exhibition, your show is up, you've created all these different pieces and you've had all these conversations around what to include and what not and the story that you're crafting, I'm curious, like, what are you walking away with? Like, what impressions are being left from this process that will inform other, or could potentially inform other art practices that you're stepping into?
I think that, to me, one of the biggest takeaways from this was understanding how to let life be a part of your process, in a sense, and kind of like leaning into what your piece is trying to tell you, in a sense. Sometimes maybe I'd be trying to get the paper objects to tell me one thing, but when I actually put them together, it felt that it told a different story completely. And so sometimes understanding what's kind of is and what isn't, and trying not to force it too much, and instead having your artwork be a conversation between you and the materials and your environment. thank you for your question.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions or comments for Mia Bella? Okay. Well, again, thank you all so much for joining us tonight and for being here to share this very special moment with us and with Mia Bella. If you haven't had a chance to log on already, like I mentioned, the website can be, or the exhibition can be viewed on our website, lasfotosproject.org/all-at-once. And like I mentioned before, I do recommend using a desktop to view it, because that way you'll be able to get in there and view all those details that Mia Bella was sharing. And then also read the captions. She shared a little bit behind the scenes, but each individual image has a caption to go with it as well, so you can view that also. And then also, Mia Bella did also create a makerspace for us. And so the Las Fotos Project Makerspace is where our students are able to share, our students, mentors, and everyone actually who's part of our community are able to share some DIY tutorials. And so Mia Bella created a makerspace for this exhibition, where she walks you through step by step on how to create a collage of your own. So if you're interested in doing that and kind of playing around as well with that, that is also on the exhibition page towards the bottom. Additionally, some of the images on the exhibition website will be available for sale. Our print store will be launching soon. And so if you're interested in purchasing any of the prints that are available, they are in, there is an indication on each image that is available for sale. You can sign up on that exhibition page as well to get notified as to when our print store is going to be launched, and details about pricing and delivery, et cetera, et cetera. So feel free to sign up for that, and we'll make sure to share out all of that with you as well. And lastly, we just, again, really want to thank everyone who joined us tonight. Thank you so much to Stephanie and Ricardo, who supported Mia Bella throughout this entire process and provided your mentorship to her. Thank you to Jessie as well, who is our project manager at Las Fotos Project, supporting Mia Bella and Stephanie and Ricardo to get this project and this exhibition up, and also supporting us tonight with all of our wonderful AV work. And also wanted to thank some of our sponsors and our funders, the Department of Cultural Affairs, the California Arts Council, Horace Goldsmith Foundation, Philip and Edith Leonian Foundation, and the Annenberg Foundation. Thank you all so much for providing the support so that we are able to do this with our students and create these wonderful opportunities for our students to have solo shows, to express themselves, to explore their creativity, and to really, you know, just connect with the world through their artwork and have a voice in that way. And this, by the way, has been recorded, so if you missed any part of it, we will be sharing this out as well. Again, thank you all so much. Really appreciate it. Be sure to connect with us, lasfotosproject.org, at Las Fotos Project on Instagram, Facebook, and Twitter. We're on all of it. And then, you know, you can also find us at the hashtag Las Fotos Project. Really appreciate you all. Have a really great night.